On day 34 of the war, Royal Air Force bombers strike deep into Iraq. In Kuwait, over 500 oil wells are reported to be on fire.
Okay, so there's the completed title sequence, animated together. I'll just spin back through the tape here, and you can have a look at each of the different elements that went together to make this piece. So if we go from the tail end, you can see first of all we have separately animated flames on each of the oil rigs around the picture. We have a mix through and a fly back here, and you see the shadow that's tracking with it. Back into the picture using corner pinning and the DVE facility, of course. Then we have text that's zipping on the screen. The planes fly across the screen totally independently, and the shadows are also independent. You see how they're moving with the plane. And you see the targets on the ground here again animating. And then, of course, the Day 34 graphic in the corner flies up, again with an independent stencil. And as it does, the title Day 34 mixes out. And then, of course, we've got live action running behind the texture and the title. So a lot of different animated effects produced in one sequence. Once we'd produced the original elements that we were going to work with, this took about 3.5 hours to put together, so demonstrating how useful this can be in a newsroom situation, because of course if you've got a story that breaks in the morning, then of course by lunchtime you would certainly want to be able to put out a story that was supported by graphics such as these. So what we're going to do now is show you how this was put together. Spinning down the Betacam tape, we'll just play the raw footage that we fed into the system to work with. This is again from Betacam tape. It's been pre-edited, but we could have quite easily edited this together ourselves within the Harriet system. So the first stage, of course, is to isolate and identify the frames that we want to work with. So we'll just spin back up the tape. And let's say we'll just cut in just after the mix. So about this point here, we mark our in point in the timecode box on the left-hand side of the screen. And then on the right-hand side, we either move down the tape and mark our exit point, or in this instance, if I know the number of frames I need, I can just simply move down the tape, in this instance 112 frames, make the clips, and the Harriet works out exactly how many frames there are. And then we simply run the VTR onto the background. So now from tape, this is going to run in real time into the RAM store within the Harriet to the right of me. And as soon as that's on the store, the menu comes back up. We'll just stand the heads down, and we'll go and look at that on the RAM store. So we're now looking at the output from the Harriet rather than the tape. And from this point onwards, there will be absolutely no degradation of quality whatsoever, because we're looking at a digital-based system. Regardless of the number of layers of animation we add onto this, it will stay perfect all the way through. Right, so we're ready now to work with our first stage of animation. And in this instance, what we're going to do is bring up the texture in the foreground, mixing up over the live action in the background. So the first thing to do is just remove the elements from the last demonstration, and we'll go into the library, and we'll bring down a texture that we have created for this particular project. And there it is on the screen. We'll just square that up so you can have a look at it. This is, again, created entirely within the Harriet and Paintbox systems. Using the Paintbox element, we've embossed this picture, we've chalked and painted on it to give this sandstone feel. And what we want to do, of course, is mix this up. So we'll start off by making a keyframe bar of 112 frames. And at the beginning of the move, of course, we're going to mix that texture right out to nothing and move down to the end of the move. And of course, if we have keyframes on, then you'll see those frames actually moving. And we'll mix that up to around about the 50% mark. Edit the final keyframe point in. And of course, Harriet is going to work out all of the in-between stages for us. So you can see that texture gradually mixing through as we run through the animation. So if we're happy with that particular move, then we go straight back into the RAM store and run it onto the final animation. Now we're rendering this in frame mode as opposed to field. It's quite a slow mix. It's running over 4.5 seconds, so we really don't need the subtlety of field mode to produce this. And of course, that will just save us a bit of time. So running in frame. It's running about 3 frames a second. So in a moment, you'll see that piece completed. You can see the texture coming through now. Here comes the tank. And there's the piece complete. So let's just review that now a few times and have a look at it. And there is the texture coming through the live action. So that's stage 1 complete. Let's move on now to the next stage, which is to bring in the title, The Gulf War. So again, an element that we have saved on the library. So we just go up to the store, bring down that title, completely created within the system, using the text from the paintbox part of the Harriet. What we want to do is fly this in and mix it up at the same time. So now, just to be different, rather than creating a live keyframe on the screen here, we're going to bring one down that's been saved on the library. Illustrating, of course, that this can be done. Very useful facility, because if you're creating news graphics, then you will often be making graphics for stories that run over several days or weeks, and you'll possibly be drawing upon the same elements to work with. So in this instance, of course, the fly down, you might want to use it several times, but with different titles on it. Now this track here indicates the move, the actual track of the move, and each stripe indicates a frame in real time. So short stripes indicate a slow move, long stripes indicate a fast move. So let's just review now the title flying down. There you can see it mixing up on the screen, flying back and turning around into the corner. And obviously that's a low resolution preview, and if we wanted to, we could quite easily watch that again, this time running the action behind it, so you get an idea of the relationship between your new layer of animation and your previously produced layer. There it is coming down the screen. So all I'd have to do now is apply that to the RAM store in full resolution. Let's just stick that down and save it to one side, and we'll move on to the next part of the animation. Now, if you remember on the finished piece, what happened was when this had frozen and this had landed in the corner, it all flew back to the top left-hand side of the screen, revealing a map behind it. So let's bring that map down. It's a still frame fed in from a 3D system using picture port going straight into Harriet. So we'll run that onto the system for about 3 or 4 seconds, immediately after the piece we've just been working on, so it joins up together. And of course we're running this down as a still, so it runs onto the store in real time. That's now complete, so we're ready to add our animation over the top. So all we simply do is go and retrieve that final element that we were working on a moment ago. And you'll notice this time the only difference is we've added day 34 onto it. So if we go into, there's the one that we've just finished, and this is identical, we've just literally added the title day 34. So then we decide that we want the zoom back to last for, let's say, 20 frames. So we run from frame 113 to 132. And go into keyframe mode again. And now, literally, edit our first keyframe point, obviously at full screen. Then we'll size it down. You see there's our map behind it. And using a safe grid generator on the system, set at 20% for save title, we can move that into the corner to exactly where the text will be safe to read. So we move to the end of the time bar, we size it down, we position it into the left, maybe size it down a little more, and that is our final keyframe point. And of course Harriet will work out all the in-between stages for us. So let's just run that as a low resolution preview. You can see the move there. And if we wanted to, of course, we could add a shadow to it. We can make that shadow any density we want, any length we want, like so. And of course, we can make it fall to any part of the screen, like so. So let's run it with a shadow on, in fact, so it'll be rendered at the same time as the frames. We don't have to make a separate pass for it. So back into the RAM store, using field this time because it is quite a fast move and we don't want any flicker on it. We're now moving this back into the top left-hand corner of the screen. And you can see that the render takes a little longer because it's quite a large cutout. And as it gets smaller, it will speed up. And of course, once this has been put onto the RAM store, we're ready to run on with our next stage of the animation, which of course is going to be the aeroplanes flying across the screen. And something in particular we want to do here is to fly the aeroplanes behind the title, The Gulf War, rather than in front. And that's easily achieved by using a stencil or mask. So we can simply add that over the animation that we produced. like so. It's appearing in red, so you can easily tell stencil protected area from background. Before we go any further, we'll just, of course, check the animation we've just produced. There's the flyback. If we're happy with that, of course, we'll just lay now down onto the store some more still frames to enable us to run our next piece of animation over the top. So we're recording live onto the RAM store, another 3.5 seconds. So we'll work with these frames for the flight of the plane. Using the stencil, we'll now go into the library and bring down one of the aeroplanes. There it is on the screen, and you can see with the stencil in use, it moves in behind it. So let's make a track up for this plane. Now what we'll do is we'll position it down at the bottom of the screen, spin it round slightly on the Z-axis, and just position it here. Edit our first keyframe point, move to the end of the bar, move the plane across the screen, spin it around slightly, size it down a little, and move it off the side of the screen. Edit the final point, and there is our track. So we can review that in low resolution to see how it's moving. And I'd like to put a curve onto that, so we go to around about the middle frame, position it across the screen and size it down so it looks like it's making a low pass. Edit again, and there's our new track. We'll just spin the cutout round to point in the correct direction, move down the bar, and we'll increase the size of the plane here so it looks like it's coming back up again. Spin it around a little, edit a new point in, go back to this end, just check the sizing, that all looks fine, and we'll just make a linear move here so there is no deceleration or acceleration at all. And we'll preview again, and there is the move. Now if I wanted to at this stage, using dynamic collage, I could quite easily produce a second plane. So here is on the screen the second cutout, and we can make a completely independent animation with this. So that's just what we'll do. Move it down the screen, spin it slightly, reduce the size a little, and have two planes coming in together. So this one will start from here, edit that point, move to the end of the keyframe bar, reposition it up the screen, spin it this time to the right perhaps, and move it off the top of the screen. Edit again, and there's our keyframe move for the second aeroplane. If I move back to the center, there you can see them both moving in tandem, each point of the stripy string. If I touch the other plane, there's the track for the first plane, and there of course is the track for the second. So let's make this one slightly smaller and position it again closer to the other plane, and we'll just check the aspect along each part of the move of this, and again we'll increase the size slightly towards the end. Move back to the earlier part of the keyframe bar, and I think we need to increase the size of that plane a little, like so. Now we'll just run that as a low resolution preview and see how it moves. I think the first plane perhaps could do with being a little smaller towards the end of the move, so we'll reduce it slightly in size and re-edit that point. Now if we're happy with that move, we simply, in field mode again, because it's quite a fast move, we apply this to the RAM store field by field. We have approximately 65 frames, that's 130 fields, 2 planes, so that's 260 separate moves, which are going to render in less than a minute on the screen, so it gives you an idea of just how powerful this system is. If I wanted to, of course, I could fly 5 or 6 cutouts across. I'm not just restricted to the 2. You can fly as many as you want on the dynamic collage facility. And of course I could fly them with or without shadows, and I could fly them totally independently, so one plane did have a shadow and one didn't. Or I could fly those independently so that as the plane flies towards the ground, as you saw on the finished piece, the shadow actually moves towards and away from the plane depending on its relative position to the ground. Well, that move is almost finished now, so as soon as it has, we can go back into the RAM store and have a look at it in full resolution and in real time. So that's now complete. So go back into the RAM store, and we'll just loop the result out a few times, and there is the move. So you can see in a very short space of time you can create extremely effective animation processes on the Harriet system. So let's move on now to one more element of this particular animation. You noticed at the beginning we had the map of Q8 fly up to fill screen, and this was actually produced using corner pinning. And once we'd filled screen with it, of course, we had the oil rigs on fire. So let's bring that map down. Here's the map that we actually filled screen with, and then we added on, of course, the rigs themselves. Now, the flame animation on each one of these rigs was created using a different form of animation facility within the Harriet system. This is cell animation. We just save that picture to one side. I'll explain how cell animation works. Basically, we can paint different cells. Here's 7 that we've painted of flames, and we can create stencils that apply to each one, and we can literally stack those on top of each other and cycle them in almost, if you like, in the traditional cell style. So bring back the picture, and we'll loop these cells at 25 frames a second and bring them back into the frame, and there they are. Apply them onto one of the oil rigs and run, say, 2 seconds of that down onto the RAM store, then play and record back that same 2 seconds with the flames on the second oil rig, and then, of course, onto the third and the fourth. So what you'll achieve is an animation of flames on every single one of those, but you've only actually had to draw one of them. And the other great advantage of this in a newsroom situation means you can update those animations by the day, and you can have less and less burning, hopefully, each day as you make your news graphics. So there are just a few examples of how this piece of animation was put together. Let's go back to the tape again and play it from the top so you can see the finished piece. And again, back into tape control. And we'll just watch it from the top once more.
On day 34 of the war, Royal Air Force bombers strike deep into Iraq. In Kuwait, over 500 oil wells are reported to be on fire.
Okay, so there is the demonstration for dynamic graphics for the newsroom, and I think you'll agree a very powerful system indeed being put to work here to produce graphics in a very short space of time. And as I said earlier, about 3.5 hours to produce this particular piece.
The Friday film, tonight at 7:30 on Q Vision.
Okay, so it's a trailer for the James Bond film, The Living Daylights, put together on the Harriet system in a very short space of time indeed, about 1.5 hours, in fact, from start to finish. Of course, that's excluding making the original elements that have been created to put it together, although, of course, they are all created within the Harriet system on the paint box part, which is, of course, the very heart of the Harriet system. So what we're going to do, first of all, is spin down the tape and feed in the piece of live footage that we actually were supplied with to produce this sequence. So let's just have a look at that from the top, coming from the Betacam now. You can see it's literally just the raw footage. It's had a few edit points, edit cuts put together, but we could have just as easily put those together in the Harriet system. So the first job we've got to do, of course, is to actually identify the frames that we want to use on this sequence. So we're now spooling back up the tape using the pen on the Harriet system to jog the tape, or of course, if we wanted to, we could use the shuttle facility within the menu. And as I say, what we'll do is we'll just identify the first frame that we need for this sequence. So we're now just jogging forward single frames. There's our in point, so we mark that in the box on the left-hand side of the screen. This shows the timecode entry point for our particular clip of footage. And then in the box on the right-hand side, we simply insert the time code for the exit, or of course we move down the tape the number of frames we require, which in this instance is how we produced it. We make up the clips, and you immediately see these numbers are worked out within the Harriet system and inserted into the boxes, and then we simply run VTR to the background. Tape is now pre-rolling, and it will go into play, and as it runs onto the RAM store, the menu will disappear, so you can see exactly which clip we're working with. There it goes, running onto the store in real time, of course, because it's a RAM store. And that's now complete. So we can stand the heads down on the tape deck, go back into the Harriet RAM store, and play that from the top. And you can see exactly the same piece, but now it's coming from the RAM store within the Harriet. And of course, it's maintaining the perfect quality that we had at the start. because of course it is a RAM store, so it's digitally based. Doesn't matter how many layers of animation we add to this, it's going to stay the same quality as it was when it was fed in the first place. So there's our clip on the system. What do we want to do to it next? Well, you'll notice this is a piece of film work, of course, so we have the black borders at the top and the bottom of the screen because the aspect ratio of film is different from that of video. So first thing is to put a border, top and bottom, within our design to cover those black areas. Now this is easily produced within the system. Again, drawing upon the painting facilities of the Harriet system, we can create any sort of border or texture that we want. Now here is an image that's been fed in from camera in actual fact. In fact, it's been cross-lit and it's an aluminium blanking panel from an engineering rack. And what we want to do is make this slightly more blue and obviously define the area of the border itself. So we'll start off by using the stencil, which is in this red. This is a matte or masking system. Run that across the screen, and first of all, just pull a black through the center so you can see the shape of the border we're going to be working with. There it is, so we've got the top and the bottom. Reverse the stencil background, and now in the painting menu, we're going to create the color that we want to work with. Around about 17 million colors can be achieved on the system. We mix down a dark blue like so, and then using the wash facility, we'll simply pull that across the texture. And you now see we have a blue tinted texture. Second stage is then to add a line on the top and the bottom. So just pull that across in stencil as well. There's one line at the top, and then the other line, of course, on the lower portion. And using the stencil, this time with an airbrush, we're going to pull that blue through the edge of the top and the bottom, like so. And then using the shade brush, we'll just highlight it at each end so you can see the kind of effect you can create. So there, very quickly, I've shown you how the border is created. And if we go back to the library now, we'll bring one down onto the system that we can use in the animation. Right, now, what we want to do, of course, is to actually apply this over the whole of the film clip. Here's one frame from that clip, and here is the border. That is on the end of my pen. And all I simply do in this instance is run it live over the material. I don't need to keyframe this. All I need to do is play the same frames in the background and results stores on the Harriet, feed the Harriet into itself using one of the digital ports, so it's literally playing and recording to itself in real time. And then using live video, I simply run the clip behind the border that I've added in the foreground. And there you can see it's running onto the film clip in real time on the RAM store. And that is literally completed now. So if we go back into the RAM store and have a look at it, there is every single frame with that border applied to it. So you can see just how fast you can affect this kind of change. Okay, so the next step is to just extend the freeze that we have at the end of this particular sequence. So we're going to put about another second onto it, just by changing the numbers in the boxes here. And again, we'll just record that now as a still onto the background. It runs down again in real time. And now what we want to do, of course, is turn the freeze frame of James Bond into an illustration so that it's ready to receive all of the typographic information that we're going to lay into the foreground. So we need to take the contrast ratios down a bit. Now we're going to achieve this, as I said, by making an illustration out of it. And we're going to use one of the new brushes on the system, which is the smudge brush, to actually push the picture around the screen using, in this instance, a chalk shape to make it look as though the image has in fact been crayoned or penciled onto the screen rather than photographic. Now this will take obviously a few minutes to achieve, so what I'm going to do is go up to the library system and bring one down that I painted a little while ago. So back into the library, and we bring it down. Now you'll notice one or two other differences on here. First of all, we have obviously chalked the entire picture. We've added a little pencil outline to it, and we put a texture across the whole screen. Now this again has come from the library and has been produced in a very similar way to the texture that we've used for the border at the top and the bottom. So the next step, of course, is to isolate the frames we want to produce the mix on, and in this instance we're going to run from frame 210 to 225. This means that most of the mix-through is going to happen during the live action of the film clip. So we create a keyframe move simply by going into 3D, and we'll just remove the old keyframe move, and now simply using the style we mix down to 0% and edit our first keyframe point in. Then we move to the end of the time bar, and you can see the action moving through it there, and we mix that up to 100% and edit the final point in. Harriet, of course, will work out all of the in-betweening for us. So we go back into the RAM store menu, And using field, because it's quite a fast mix, we simply apply that now to the ram store. And you can see there the mix frame coming through. Working very quickly. That's complete now. So we'll just loop that around a couple of times and see the effect. And there you can see the mix to the animated, from the animation to the illustrated frame. So if we're happy with that stage, then again what I'm going to do now is record a few seconds of still down onto the store to enable us to run the next piece of animation over the foreground. So that's now running down in real time. And the next step will be to add on, as I said, perhaps one or two of the typographic elements. So we're going to go up to the library now and bring down the title itself, the Friday film. So back into the library. And there you can see on screen immediately we have this title, the Friday film. Now, to help me position this on the screen, we have a safe grid generator, which has been preset here, in fact, at 20%, which is safe title. And I can now move this around the screen, position it wherever I want, knowing, of course, that I'm completely safe because I have the grid generator on screen. So let's just position it here. And having done that, of course, we can take the generator back off again. And we have a keyframe moving, in fact, of 21 frames. Now, on the original material that you watched a few moments ago, I mixed this through with an embossed effect. Well, just for a change on here, we're going to spin it into the screen so I can show you another effect that Harriet is very capable of. So, first of all, picking up the x-axis, we spin it out, edit our first keyframe point, move down the time bar, and spin the image back into screen like so, and mark our edit point at the end of the move. And we can preview that in low resolution. And again, if we're happy with the move, we simply go into the RAM store menu, and using field, because again this is a fast animation, we apply that to the finished piece. And there you can see it now processing field by field through the whole movement. Now, once this is complete, of course, we can review that in real time and in full resolution. And that's now finished. So let's just have a look at that a few times, see how it works. And there you can see our turn into the screen. Now, if we're happy with that, we can move on to the next stage. And there's something here which I particularly want to show you regarding this particular animation, and that is the ability to light source on elements on the screen. So we're going to work this again, of course, over the same keyframe move. It's very simple. We just go into Style and pick up a stencil, and with white on the pen in this instance, we go back to the start of that keyframe move and mix the white element down to 0%. Move along the keyframe bar to the point at which we would like the highlight to start, and edit another keyframe point in. Go a little bit further, mix it up this time to about 70 or 80%, something like that. Edit another point, and then of course move on down the time bar further again to take it back to 0. And that is literally all you do. And again, using field, we now apply that to the same piece of the RAM store. And as it turns around this time, you'll see the highlight slowly mixing up as that element turns on screen. And once it's complete, of course, we can have a look at that again in real time. So we'll loop it round, and there you see the highlight. Now, that could just as easily be a shadow. We could turn it around the other way so that we had a black rectangle instead of a white one, so it looked like a shadow on the screen. And of course, we could have it coming from the left or the right, or even produced diagonally across the clip from, say, top left to bottom right. So that's the next step completed. Let's just have another look at a typographic section. This time, the C, the Q that we're bringing down onto the screen, Q for Q vision. There it is. Now, this appears in actual fact in Quantel's special blue, which is used for the logo. Now, as you know, we've got around about 17 million colors we can mix on the palette, or alternatively, in this instance, I can actually go back to the library system again and bring down a palette that's already had saved on it the Quantel blue, which we can there see on the screen. So let's bring the cutout back in. There it is. Now, again, you've been watching me create keyframes live on the system. You also, of course, have the facility to save and retrieve these, which is extremely useful. So there is the element for the move. This is the stripy string showing the track. Each stripe is a frame of real-time action. So the longer the stripe, the faster the move. The shorter the stripe, the slower the move. So let's just preview this piece and have a look at it. And you notice on the fly down, it's a low-resolution preview, and you can see that we're not only flying the cue down into the screen and with a cushion stop, we're also mixing it in as well. And that same process was used to create all of the other typographic elements on this particular piece of work. So there's just one other thing here which would be interesting to look at. If we just put that picture to one side, and I'll bring down from the library the picture that we used for the bullet holes. Let's just go and bring that down. There it is. I'll put that in the other temporary store. Now, I'll just show you how easy it is to produce this kind of effect. All you simply do is take the last frame that you're working with, so let's bring this one back, and you make a stencil using the painting menu. You can see there the shapes that we have on screen. Simply paint it on the screen, and then use that stencil and pull a dark color across the screen. So in this instance, it's a black, and you can now see the outline of these shapes defined. And then you simply apply a little highlight and low light to each side of the bullet holes to make it look as though it's actually torn paper that's been bent through the hole. So, and again, if you want to, of course, you could work in detail, go right in on a zoom, like so, and pull back out, and there's the finished result. Now, you simply apply this to your animation store by using the buying and selling routine here. So you buy one frame that obviously doesn't have the bullet holes on, and then using restore, and obviously working in conjunction with the soundtrack so the timing's right, you literally restore one of the bullet holes, sell a few frames, restore the second, sell a few frames, the third, and so on till you finish the process and you have all four on the screen. So there we have shown you very quickly, just over a course of a few minutes, exactly how this piece was put together. As I said before, it took about an hour and a half to animate all the different sections for this, obviously not including the original creation of the elements. So let's go back into the VTR again, control from the front panel of the Harriet here, and have a look at the final sequence, just to remind you of the finished result once more.
The Friday film, tonight at 7:30 on Q Vision.
Okay, so there we see Harriet, as I say, hard at work in the TV promotions area. Extremely effective piece of equipment, capable of producing animations such as this in a very short space of time indeed. Okay, so there we are, the title sequence to the Davro show, 30 seconds long. And the first thing you may be thinking is, well, how come you can make a 30-second title sequence if you only have just 12 and a half on the RAM store? Well, quite simply, you use the magneto-optical disk drive to archive your pictures off as you're working on them. You can save about 30 seconds in real time on just one disk. So it's a very, very simple process. So let's look in detail at how this was put together. We're going to spin down the Betacam tape, and we're going to look at the material that we were supplied with to actually create this animation. And you'll see that literally all we had was the comedian with no makeup, no costume, just assuming the poses and characters of each of the characters that he portrayed in the title sequence. So all we have to do here is select the piece we want to work with, move back down the store. We're just running down the tape now by jogging with the pen on screen. And we mark our in points in the little box on the left-hand side for our timecode entry point, and then move down the store and mark a point in the box on the right-hand side. So we just tap again, make up the clips. Harriet works out exactly how many frames are in that time-coded section, and then we simply run the VTR live onto the background. This is going now from Betacam onto the RAM store inside the Harriet system. And that's complete, so we'll just stand the heads down on the deck, come out of the VTR and go back into the RAM store, and there you can see all those frames that we're going to be working with. So of course the first thing that we want to do is separate the character from his background so we can work with him on the backgrounds that we create for the animation. We do that quite simply by bringing down just one of the stills of that particular piece we've fed in, and in the effects menu we use the overlay facility, which is a keying facility, a luminance keying facility, to actually separate foreground from background. We simply run that down the screen. We can change the levels, make that slightly darker. And of course you can go on adjusting this and fine-tuning it till you get it exactly how you want it. And we'll just clean a little bit out to the center here. Obviously this has been put together very quickly, so you could do with a little bit of fine-tuning still. But if we reverse that, you can see quite quickly how we've already managed to get quite a reasonable level of key foreground from background. Now that's applied, of course, to every single frame that we feed in, and as it's done, it's saved on the library, and it's an automatic process. Once you've set the level for the first one in the overlay menu, then all of the other ones are produced on a sequence and saved either on the magneto-optical or on the system disk for use later on. So we prepared that piece, we put it to one side. Let's take a look at the next stage, which is the background itself, of course. Now, the character that we're looking at in this particular piece is going to be Dame Edna Everage. So we're going to put Dame Edna over a background of Australia. This is the background itself that we use, which has been, again, utilised the smudge and smear brush to give us this effect. And then we simply flip the picture around through a stencil to get what you can see on the screen here. Then we'll bring down a stencil, which will depict the lights that we use around the outside of the coastline here. So the coastline is actually made of a light moving around the outside. And then, of course, we'll need a light source to fly through it. So we'll just delete the elements from the last demonstration, go into the library, and bring down the light source that we're going to be using. This is simply a cutout, which we move around the screen with a bright color. So we want some bright colors for this. So again, we can either mix them on the screen in the palette, or, of course, we can bring them out from a palette that has been saved on the library. And here's one that we've got with some bright colors on it. So there is our light source. We simply move this around the coastline. We'll just change the size of that slightly. Simply move it around the coastline, but through the stencil, so you get this effect. Now, before we go any further, we'll need, obviously, to lay a few seconds down onto the RAM store of this particular still. So we'll put 2 seconds down. And what we're going to do is run this as a loop, and we're going to play the Harriet and record it back to itself in a loop to create the animation. So what will happen is the frame will come from the RAM store, we'll apply our light source over it, like so, and then record it back into exactly the same position in the RAM store. And of course that's only possible because it is working in real time and is chip-based rather than disk-based. So we feed the Harriet system into itself using a digital port, and simply working in live video and looping this store, we bring our cutout onto the screen, start it off, and there you can see it following itself around the screen. So there's one layer. So we'll just go back into the palette, pick up a different color. We'll have the pink this time. We'll run a second layer down. So now we have 2 separate colors chasing each other around the screen. And we'll just put a third one on there, say the yellow. So you can see how very quickly you can build up this kind of effect. Right, we'll just switch that off. Now we'll have a look at that on the result. There you see the finished effect. Now obviously I've just put that together in a very few seconds, so the accuracy of it depends entirely on the amount of time you're prepared to spend on it. But nevertheless, you can see there in a very short space of time we've created the feel of the effect that we used in the finished animation. So at this stage, we're ready to bring the actor back and put him in the foreground. So we can go back to the library and bring down one of those frames that we've saved. And we'll just place that in the foreground over that background. So here is one of the frames over the animated background. So all we need to do, of course, is bring down 100 or 2 of these over the animation, and then we're ready to run the next steps of animation on the top of this. Well, we're just for the time that we have in this demonstration, we're going to move down and take that next step from tape, just to save a few minutes, and you can see the next step. So here is the next stage, and we're just going to feed this into the RAM store. Just jogging down to find the first frame. There it is. So we mark that as an in point on the box on the left-hand side of the time code, and then on the right-hand side, we mark the exit point. Now we know how many frames we need here, so we're just moving 150 down the tape. Mark an out point, make up the clips, and load that onto the RAM store again. Now as it runs on, I'll show you the extra pieces we've added onto this. You'll see the map of Australia, but you notice we mixed up from black, which is very straightforward on the Harriet system. And we've added the wig, and we've added the dress, and we've added the glasses. Okay, so that's now loaded. We stand the heads down on the tape, and there you can see on the RAM store the piece loaded on. Now what we're going to do at this stage is add another 6 or 7 layers over the top. So exactly the same way that these were put on. So you can see the process that went into it. So we simply go into the store and bring down, in this instance, the makeup. As I say, there's 6 or 7 pieces here, 7 in fact. So we load those onto the screen. There's 4 of them, and 5. 6th one, and of course finally the other earring. There's 7 into paste up, and you can see using dynamic collage I have the facility to move all of these independently around the screen. So there are all 7 layers for the animation. Now I can make these keyframes up live on the system, or in this instance again for brevity I'm just going to bring down one from the library that has been completed for this particular move, and then we'll play with that on the screen and adjust it in various ways so you can see exactly how it works. So we go back into the paste up menu, and you'll see now that we have all those keyframe moves on the screen. If I tap down on any object, you'll see the keyframe move that relates to it. So there's the one for the powder. There's the one for the brush. The other makeup box. And that brush. And if we move down the store a little, there we see the lipstick coming in on the left-hand side of the screen. There's the track for this. And as I said before, each stripe indicates a frame of real time. So if it's a longer stripe, then of course it's moving fast. If it's a short stripe, it's moving more slowly. Now we can preview this in low resolution, so you can see exactly how each element actually moves on screen. And of course, apart from that, we can also run the keyframe over the action that we've previously created with that moving as well. So you have the interaction between the foreground and the previously produced background layers, which is so important. And in fact, to prove just how useful this is, if you watch in a few seconds, you'll see the lipstick appearing on the left-hand side of the screen. And as it does, you watch the lips of the actor. You'll see just as the lipstick arrives, you see his lips purse. So you can see the interaction of foreground, background is so important to actually get your movement correct. If we want to, of course, at any stage, we can adjust these keyframe moves. For example, just back here, you'll notice the brush moves right across the foreground above the lipstick, which obliterates it almost completely. So what we'll do is, at this point, we'll just simply move the brush down the screen and edit a new keyframe point in just here. So now, there's the new track. You can see the brush is going to miss the lipstick almost entirely. So we'll move back up the track, and we'll just run that piece again, low resolution preview, so you can see how it's been adjusted. And there you see it's now cutting underneath the lipstick and almost missing it completely. Let's run that once more. So the brush moves down the screen and now moves underneath. So you can see just how easy it is to affect changes on every single one of these keyframe moves. And if I wanted to, in the style mode, I could take, say, the lipstick itself and apply a shadow to it. So now that cut out, but none of the others, has a shadow applied to it. So they are totally independent. I can change the density of that shadow. I can change the length at which it falls, so we could reduce that, like so. Very, very flexible indeed. So if I'm happy with that keyframe move, of course, now I can apply it to the entire animation. Something else that's quite interesting on here, when we fed the material into the actor, of course, we didn't, not only did we not have any costumes or backgrounds, but we didn't have any makeup either. And these, the makeup elements were all applied entirely within the system. I'll show you how that was done. We just picked the color of the lipstick, for example, and pick the color of the lips, and mix down a tone that is halfway between the two. Then we'll zoom in to the area of the mouth, and using a wash, we'll now just, with an airbrush, we will now just apply that to the screen. So you can see how easy it is to actually put makeup on as you run. So what we do here is use the buy and sell routines. We buy a frame, we paint a little bit of lipstick on, we sell it, we buy the next one, the lipstick moves, and of course we paint a little bit more on the lips. And it's really very fast process. It only takes a few seconds a frame, and that's how the entire animation was built up. So a very brief look at how the Davro title sequence was put together. And as I said, produced entirely on the Paintbox and Harriet systems. No external work at all, nothing from Edit Suite, nothing from a DVE. Everything was produced within the system. And I think, again, it shows very clearly just how useful and flexible the Harriet system is. So let's just spin down the tape and watch this particular piece again from the top. Okay, so that's Harriet hard at work in the dynamic graphics for post-production area, producing title sequences for broadcast and non-broadcast programs, of course. Extremely flexible system, and I think you'll agree that shows the full extent of the capabilities of Harriet. So let's move on to the next demonstration, where we're going to be showing you the new facilities on Harriet here at Montreux. And the best way to actually show you these is to actually take examples from each of the other demonstrations we've been running. So you can see, in conjunction with the other projects, exactly what we've added to the system. So we're going to bring down a picture now, in fact, from that piece of work you've just seen. And we're going to use this to show you one of the new facilities. So here's a freeze frame from the clip fed in from the James Bond film. And you notice on the left-hand side of the screen, we have various artifacts which obviously would be unwanted. Now, traditionally, we could have removed these either by using the paste up menu and cutting and moving texture, or using an airbrush and simply matching color on the screen and painting out an area. But of course, the problem with this is, if I zoom in on that, you can see that you actually lose the texture entirely on the picture. Now, Copybrush totally overcomes this problem by literally taking a section of the texture from one part of the screen and translating it across to another. So you can see immediately how very easy it is to remove unwanted elements such as these marks on the picture here. Just remove the dust there. Of course, you can translate texture from any part of the screen to any other part. You can see in a short space of time how easy it is to create the desired effect. So that's using the Copybrush to retouch in a very subtle way. Of course, you can also translate picture across the screen with it to create various other optical effects and so on. So I think you'll agree, a very useful facility indeed that's been added to the painting and retouching capabilities of the Harriet system. So that's the Copybrush. So let's have a look at the other one. This is the Smudge brush, and you might have seen earlier that we actually drew the illustration of James Bond here by using the chalk in conjunction with smudge to give this illustrative feel. Well, another good example of the application of this particular element is something which we have on the library here. This is a freeze frame from a Betacam that's been fed into the system, and I'll just show you the before and after shots. We bring back the original. Now, this is shot on Betacam, as I said, fed into the Harriet system, and in the Paintbox part of the tool, we actually retouch all this picture to give you the result that I'm going to restore through to now. So we just have a look at it. It's got obviously it's at night, so we've got a sky that's been toned down. We've taken the road away and added a river instead. And we've added snow to the roofs, as you can see. And it's night time, so we've put the lights on in the house, and we've generally made the picture darker. Taken every 20th century element out to give us the final result here. And as I say, this is where the smudge brush comes in extremely useful, because of course you see the reflections in the water here. Well, these are created very easily by using the smudge brush. where you are literally pushing the picture image around, so you can very quickly produce a very accurate reflective effect, like so. So again, just one of the many applications that you could apply the new smudge brush to. So there's the first two things we've added to the system here at Montreux, the copy and smear brushes. The next stage, which I'd like to show you, the next new facility is the ability to color correct your image. Now here's a picture taken from the next demonstration, dynamic graphics for post-production. And this is still from the Davro show, and this again came from Betacam. And one, of course, the important things to remember about the Harriet system is now you're working with an animation system, there's a very good chance that you'll be working with live material and maybe more than one clip. Now, if you're working with 2 or 3 clips of live footage which you're feeding in, it's important if you're editing together in the system that you have the ability to color match and color correct one clip to another. And now, of course, using color fettle or color correction, we can do that entirely within the system. Now, you see I have the menu in front of me on screen, and here we have a low-resolution version of that picture, which enables us to quickly preview the adjustments we make. So, for starters, let's just look at the contrast levels and increase those a bit. You see immediately that's affected. Let's take the brightness up slightly as well. Maybe we'll reduce the contrast a little. You see I'm working with the numerical boxes here. An alternative, I could change the color as well. So let's just look at the red factor in here and increase that slightly. And you can see that we've just warmed up the tones in the face there slightly and a little more. So you can achieve some very subtle color differences on here. And if I'm happy with that level of color correction, I simply hit confirm and it will run the entire corrective process down the whole picture in full resolution. And there you can see the whole picture is being color corrected. So that's using color fettle to a very subtle effect, just to create small changes to pictures. If we take it back to the original image again, of course, if you want to, you can just as easily produce some very striking changes. For example, you can invert certain elements of the picture, so we can invert the reds to greens, or alternatively, of course, we can invert the entire picture, so you get a negative effect. Now, I've been working in the numerical boxes here on this side of the screen. I could just as easily work on the graph here. So this is completely interactive. I can just tap down on various parts of the graph and change the level of coloring on screen. You can see you can get some really very strange effects. So a very useful addition to, again, the retouching and corrective processes within the Harriet system. So that's color correction, or color fettle as it's known. What we're going to do now is show you the third facility which we've added to the system here at Montreux, which is called Dynamic Collage, which is by far and away the most exciting addition to the system. And to demonstrate this to you, what I'm going to do is record a few frames of animation onto the RAM store. And we're going to do this with this snooker table here, completely drawn on the system. And I'm going to run 4 seconds down onto the background of the RAM store. And then we're going to run some animation in the foreground over it, which will illustrate dynamic collage. So there's 4 seconds laid down to the store. Just need to retrieve a few other elements from the library to produce this. We'll remove the old stencil we're working with and go and bring down a different one. And then we'll go back to the library and bring down some cutouts. And of course these are going to be snooker balls which we're working with on this particular animation. Now, I don't know if you've seen the demonstration for the paint box, but if you have, you'll have seen that you now have the ability to have several different cutouts on the screen at the same time. And we, again, of course, have that same facility on the Harriet because, as I said earlier, the very heart of the Harriet system is a VE paint box, which, of course, we've added the RAM store to, and the facility to animate totally interactively between the RAM store and your painting and manipulative facilities. So we're just going to make 10 of these snooker balls on screen, and you can see, just as we do on the V-Series paint box, we can move each one of these elements around totally independently. And I could take this ball here, for example, and I could change the size of it. If I wanted to, I could spin it round on any axis, like so. And of course, I could change the aspect ratio of it, so you can see just how easily it is to work totally independently with each particular element. Let's bring down one more snooker ball here. Bring down the white one. Okay, so you now have 11 separate cutouts on the screen. So so far, of course, this is exactly the same as you have on the V-Series paint box, but of course we're looking at Harriet, which is an animation system, and we can take that all one stage further. Because we're working in animation, we now have the facility to work not only with multiple cutouts on the screen, but to animate each individual cutout in a totally independent animation track. So here's one keyframe set that I've just loaded down onto the system, and you'll notice that every single element that I've loaded has a separate keyframe move. The speed, the direction of travel, the density, everything is independent. So let's just take one track, say the white ball, for example, and move a little bit down the trail to, say, there. And what happens as soon as you do that is every other element on the screen moves to its respective position for that animation. Move a little bit further along, you can see the same thing. And you can do that with any particular one. So let's take this one, for example, move it back to there. You see, again, they all move back to their respective positions. The important thing, of course, about this is you're not just saving time in your animation by running, instead of 11 layers, you're running one layer with 11 separate elements all at the same time, but it allows you to see the interaction between every single layer of animation. Now imagine trying to do this layer by layer. It would be virtually impossible, because of course you could only see one thing at one time, and you wouldn't know what the interaction was going to be until it was perhaps too late. Now, you see these two balls at the back of the table here. It's only become obvious now that they're going to hit each other. So of course you can now go into your keyframe moves for each of these balls and take the appropriate action. So this ball, of course, is going to veer off slightly to the left of the screen, and the other one, which had in fact stopped, is now going to start moving again because it was hit. And you can apply that same process, of course, to every single element on the screen. And you can review that, of course, in low resolution, so you can see that you're happy with the movement you have. Or, of course, in this instance, what we'll do is stop at a few frames from now, so at this point, and we'll go into the RAM store, and we'll actually run the entire piece to store. And we're going to use field animation for this, so it's nice and smooth. And that's now processing everything. And you see it's processing them all together. There are, of course, 100 frames in this move, and there are 11 objects. And we're field animating, so that's 200 moves and 11 objects. That means 2,200 separate animations. And they are all going to take place, rendered onto the RAM store, in something just under 2 minutes, which I think proves just what a powerful system this really is. We're also using it in conjunction with a stencil, so that as the balls reach the pockets, they will in fact disappear from sight if the stencil is actually active. And the important thing to remember about this, of course, is that you don't just have the facility to work with one type of cutout, as we have here. You could bring down anything you wanted. So you could have, for example, a map that we used earlier in the Newsroom demonstration with an armored tank, an armored personnel carrier on it, 2 tanks, a helicopter, a couple of planes. They can be totally different objects moving in completely different paths across the screen. And of course, if we wanted to, we could run the shadows on a separate pass. So they would all be, again, rendered at the same time, but they would be separate from the balls. So if one of them bounced off the screen, the shadow would act accordingly and perhaps diminish in intensity and size. And the other thing, of course, is we have a priority level system on here, which means that every single element of that animation has its own priority set to it. So the lower the level, then the lower the priority. And that basically means that low priority elements will run behind higher priority elements. So you get this degree of layering actually produced in one pass. Now, okay, so what would happen if you had one element that first of all started behind, let's say a red ball started behind the white ball, and then later in the same animation it moved in front? Very straightforward. All you do is stop the animation at a particular frame, reverse the priorities, and then start the animation from that particular moment of the move. You can see now it's almost finished the complete piece. It's got about half a dozen frames to go, so you can see just how very fast it is. And once that's complete, of course, we can run it in real time, and you can see the whole move. Right, so we'll just go back into the RAM store now, and we'll run that from the top. And there is the completed animation. And that was rendered, put together entirely whilst I was explaining how the priority levels work. So you can see just what a fast system it is. And this, in fact, this entire move, even though it was pre-created, only took about 40 minutes to put together from scratch. So I think you'll agree An extremely powerful facility, extremely powerful addition to the Harriet system, enabling you to multi-layer to any number. You can work with 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 different cutouts. Really, the number of cutouts you can work with is restricted not so much by the Harriet as by the number that the operator feels he can work with happily at any one time. So there we are, that's dynamic collage, rounding up the new facilities that we're offering on Harriet this year at Montreux.